there's lots of people that are really good at like very specific tasks and roles, but they're kind of missing generalists that are able to kind of like put the whole thing together. Like, and that's one of the things artists are particularly good at is curating.
Presented by Sacramento Educational Cable Consortium. You're listening to Lights, Camera, Learn. All right, welcome to another episode of Lights, Camera, Learn. Our guest today is Tim Needles. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I looked up a lot of your background. I don't really know where to start because I had artist, educator, performer, author. So when people first meet you, how do you introduce yourself? What do you tell them you do?
It's often context, but I think the creativity is the core thing
Sure.
that I do. So that's whether it's teaching, whether it's as an artist, as a writer, as a speaker, like that's the centerpiece of what I do.
Okay. So there was one thing that came up though that I noticed, the NASA Solar System Ambassador. What does that entail? Because I've always had a fascination with space. When I saw that come up, I go, how does one become a solar system ambassador? And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, like with a lot of my career, like if you just ask too many questions, you end up with a position. So that's sort of how it happened. I was writing my first book, Steam Power, and I was curious, obviously as an artist, I believe art belongs with STEM, but I wanted to just see how it worked in the industry. So I was asking NASA, about how they kind of, view it. And I was really delighted and that, they're hiring people as artists for creative thinking, and they need origami experts to understand how to fold the space telescope into the rockets. And so eventually they just offered me a position, and what's nice is you get a quick overview of all of the missions and then support on, sharing that out with the public and especially with education.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. That's not something most people would even think exists. So kudos to you for being able to do that. So given the whole context of creativity, have you always felt like you were a creative person, or is this something that just kind of evolved as you went along with yourself?
Yeah, it was probably always there, but I never really saw myself as creative. It took a good teacher in third grade that kind of, brought it out of me and kind of illuminated. Like I needed to be, a situation where she asked me to work with her individually to, solve a creative problem. So like that kind of thing kind of like changed my perspective on it. It's really nice to know in elementary school, kind of like what you're about. So like that's the benefit of that. And that's, probably a good part of the reason I'm a teacher now.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is that some people might think they're creative, but get told they're not. And was there ever any place then after that time in your life where you still pursued creativity in some way, shape, or form, but people tried to dissuade you from that or told you weren't that creative to begin with?
Yeah, I think people are afraid of creative careers. So like, when I was going to college for the arts, I think, my parents were very concerned about it. And, certainly I've kind of, you face some resistance all the time, basically. I mean, even in, educational settings, I'm a keynote speaker and I'll do like featured speaking roles at a lot of conferences. And I think creativity is not often put on the same playing field as, some of the other educational values. And it's ironic because I think in the world of AI that we're kind of living in now, it's actually becoming more important. So it's actually gaining, weight in terms of, school, because it's one of the things, the tools can't do.
Yeah, I think that's true. One of the things that I think anyway is that we all have a creative bent. We just express it differently, right? I had a boss. I worked at a TV station. I was the head of marketing. She was the boss of the whole station, and she came out of sales. And she goes, "I'm just not a creative person, Aaron." I said, "I bet you when you ran into a difficult sales position, you got creative. You just didn't call it that." And so, it forced her to reframe the way that she thought of creativity, right? It's all about, I think it's about problem solving and how you go about, it's not all of creativity because there's obviously creative expression, but there's the creativity and the problem solving part.
Yeah, and that's something I see across the board. So like, I find this with students and parents all the time, especially with parents. Like parents are a little harder than students on it because I think, maybe ideas are changing a little bit, but you can be creative in whatever job role you're
Yeah,
doing. It doesn't matter, like I've seen, creative landscapers. It doesn't matter. Like it's about bringing an innovative approach more than anything, and
sure.
being a good problem solver. So, yeah, I think it's also a muscle you could strengthen. I think that's an important thing for people to understand when you're talking about creativity. It's something you can get better at.
Yeah.
So, you want to work that muscle as much as you can, because it gives you it's not going to necessarily help you solve a problem, but it's going to give you more confidence that you're going to be able to find a solution when it's a really difficult problem.
I think that's true. So besides the teacher you had in third grade, then who are the mentors and other folks in your life that helped you continue on that path of creativity?
A lot of educators kind of along the way have really taken
Okay.
a big part. So, like, in high school, my art teachers, obviously, and then just offering me, after I kind of took all of the art classes, independent studies, and that's where you really get to experiment and try new things. So
Mm.
it's more interesting. So, like, that was a great opportunity. Certainly in college, I went to School of Visual Arts in New York City, so all of the teachers are like practicing artists, and that's an amazing opportunity because you're seeing them work, you're seeing them sometimes gain notoriety just because of the shows that they're in and what they're doing. So I had a number of really good teachers there, and even as an educator, I think sort of you connect to a creative community that helps kind of support that, because
Yeah.
if you let like the negative voices around you kind of like exist too much, it could be problematic.
Yeah, I could see that. So you've had this TED talk where you did everyday creativity. What does that phrase mean?
Yeah, like it goes back to what I was saying, where it's a muscle you could strengthen. So I think that, like, I try to find different ways to be creative every day. And
Yep.
one of the things that I kind of believe is that, like, the school system doesn't really, if they're not assessing it, it doesn't matter. And I think kids kind of know that. So, like, as much as we talk about creativity being important, like, you're never really, specifically working on that. So I started creating these, creative exercises once a week, that are sort of abstract, and, like, an example would be create a self-portrait without using any art materials. uh,
Okay. I like that.
so, like,
Yeah.
one of the ironies that I found is that if you kind of put students in a box, it's a little bit easier to find a creative solution to get out of it. So, limitations will actually help people be more creative a lot of times.
Yeah.
And that's probably true in our life too. I mean, as teachers, you're facing limitations all the time, and you're finding creative ways out.
Yeah, I mean, I did not make this up, but I've always believed that constraint forces creativity. I mean, you could even go back to Hollywood during the Hayes Commission when there was all the constrictions about what they could or couldn't say, what they could or couldn't show, and some of the stories you read about how the writers got around that,
Yeah.
and they still got innuendo in there without anybody, catching it sometimes.
Yeah, that's a classic period too. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it actually led to like this kind of birth of, like, these really creative solutions of
Yes.
sort of like getting around the topic.
Yeah, definitely. So, what do you feel are some myths that either students and or other teachers have about creativity that you try to dispel?
I mean, like, first and foremost, that is that it's directly associated with art. I think artists are,
Hmm.
particularly apt at using their creativity, but it's not something that belongs in the art domain by itself. I think anyone could be creative in any role. Um, and I think the other thing is that, like, the teachers, tend to traditionally work in silos, and I think that, like, interdisciplinary education, which is much more relative to the real world,
Yeah.
allows for just way more creativity. So, like, I love doing projects with other classes and other disciplines, and even on other levels, because I get to learn as an educator, as well as lend a hand in teaching. So you lead a lot more creative situations that way, that you have some unexpected
Hmm.
results. And I think there's a little bit of anarchy in creativity that is uncomfortable to people. Like, there's
Yeah.
you're often sort of either breaking the rules, or trying things that you haven't done before. There's a risk-taking aspect to it, but it's extremely important because if you look throughout history, like, a lot of our most important developments came from these really creative situations that really then changed the world.
Yeah, I think that's true. So, as you're dealing with students and working with other teachers, what are some things that they can do to kind of break through what might be a roadblock to their own creativity? Things that they can think about or exercise or anything like that?
Well, I think it's a lot of educators tend to kind of get into a rhythm, and I think
Hmm.
uh, if you want creativity, you're going to have to implement a little jazz. So something that's totally out of rhythm that suddenly is a
Yeah.
quick change. So breaking the rhythm certainly helps. Also, I'm a big advocate of actually trying something that you don't know very well. So we're kind of beyond the place where you could really be an expert in things in the way you used to be able to.
Hmm.
So, certainly with technology, you're able to try new things and experiment and maybe be more collaborative in that approach with students. And, the learning will always be there. Not necessarily the
Right.
results, but the learning will always be there.
I think that's true. So, you know, I want to ask you then, what kind of art do you engage in?
Kind of everything. I mean,
Uh
that's the
huh.
nice thing about being an art teacher is that you're really working in lots of different media. So, I've been doing a project since 2017 where I take a video a day and then I have a video journal of my year.
Hmm.
Um, I do drawing and painting still, like both on paper or digitally. Filmmaking is a big favorite of mine. So, whether it's narrative filmmaking or it's like multimedia works with museums and things like that. And then, now in the world of AI, I'm experimenting with new technologies and making art with it too. So, a little bit of everything is kind of a fun way to move forward.
Yeah. So, when you get in a creative rut, then what do you do? How do you get out of that? Or do you ever find yourself in one?
Yeah, I mean, the students are always kind of talking about being in a creative rut. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta believe you just work. You just, it
Uh
might
huh.
not be work that you're happy with, but
Right.
like you work your way through it. So, it's always good to try something different or just change some of the elements. So, work in a different place, use different materials.
Hmm.
I'm often working on a couple different projects at one time, which helps you avoid some of that, I think. So that when you kind of are, in a point where you're thinking about something, then you can actually move over and actually do work on another project. So that also helps a lot.
I can see that. It kind of reflects, when you read about actors and other folks in Hollywood that are painters or sculptors or they have some other artistic expression. And I got to believe that's doing kind of what you're talking about here, Tim, is it gives them an opportunity to kind of refresh, recharge, do something completely different so they just don't get stagnant in the one thing that they focus on.
Yeah, it's probably more important there than anywhere else because, I worked a little bit as a journalist, with film,
Okay.
television, and movies, and I remember talking to like someone like Jonah Hill, who he had gotten this big acting role early on because he ended up meeting Dustin Hoffman, who gave him a
Wow.
role, and then it was just nothing for a long time, and that's what being an actor often is. So he started to have to write. So when you're able to take on the writer's hat, you're able to kind of create for yourself, and
Sure.
you're not just, at the mercy of other people. And
Yeah.
that's become, that kind of you have actors who are writers who are also directors and producers, and it's become more popular now.
That's true. So, since you brought up AI a couple times, I was going to wait to ask about it, but I want to ask it now. How do you incorporate it into your own creative endeavors, and how are you incorporating it into classrooms?
So a little bit different in both sides. So in
Yeah.
creative endeavors, I think it's really great for pre-visualizing things. So rather than me actually make it. So as an example for my book cover, I just did a second edition of Steam Power, and
Hmm.
one of the more difficult parts is just getting the approval for the cover. So I wanted to do the cover, and so I kind of just used an AI prompt. I described everything. I put in source images. It came out with an image. I shared
Yeah.
that image, then I got approval, and then I actually made everything by hand. So I didn't actually use AI to
But
make it,
it
but
gave
I
you an
used it for
idea of
the
where to start, right? Yeah.
yeah. And it's great in that way. We'll do that certainly in classes, if we're building something for an outdoor classroom,
Hmm.
students could create something and then use augmented reality to see what it would look like in the space. That's terrific. And it really is helpful because not everyone has the imagination to visualize what something's going to look like. um, and then it's just great for sort of research. It's a fantastic research
Okay.
tool. You're able to get a lot of information and then synthesize it into images or videos or notes or audio. And that's a tremendous benefit to everyone, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. So, are there particular platforms you use? Obviously, probably Chat GPT, but in terms of visualization and things like that, what are you using?
Yeah, so I'm mostly using the Google tool. So like
Yeah,
Google's Notebook LM is a favorite of mine. It's one of the safest tools because it's not using the entire internet like ChatGPT would. So
right.
you're not going to get as many hallucinations and things like that. And certainly Adobe Firefly I like because it's in all their programs now, Photoshop and
Yeah,
things like that. So it's not using just random people's art. As an artist, I never want to take anyone else's images. So like it's using their stock, which they paid for, and other things like
right.
that. So that works really well. And then I'm playing with different tools too. So like I find that I'm using Gemini, and I'm kind of really staying up on AI because it's just so quick
It's
moving,
crazy. Yeah,
and yeah, just trying to like keep up with it is interesting by itself. So like it's really interesting to watch the people from Claude and what they're doing, and they seem to kind of be the leaders now in the U.S. I think that even though OpenAI and ChatGPT are probably the most popular tool, I
yeah.
think what's happening with Claude and certainly Gemini is right on their tails now.
Yeah, with the nano banana
Yeah.
element of it. Yeah, we played around with that too. It's incredible just with even now with what little prompting you need to get it to get something that you want.
Yeah, it is phenomenally good. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's crazy how good it got so quickly. And then it's nice that like Adobe and Google and even Apple are kind of like all working together. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
No,
So
it doesn't. No, if you asked them to do that with a device creation, you'd never,
yeah,
no, they would never do it because too much money involved. So when you're teaching
exactly.
the classes, then using AI, what are you doing, Tim, to help kids, understand the difference between AI and the real image and the responsible use of AI and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I'm even helping students do research on that. So like we're
Hmm.
having a harder time now as humans recognizing what is an AI image, and
Yeah.
almost 50 to 60% of social media now is AI, created. So it's like it's out there and it's a major part. And some of it's obvious. If you see a celebrity that's doing
Yeah.
something that they're probably not doing, but there's also like cat videos and
Yes.
like videos of like just random stuff that is all AI created, and I'm like, oh, that's strange. So I think media literacy has become AI literacy in a big part because it's changing the culture a little bit. And then like it's like car racing. You can't talk about where you are. You have to talk about where you're going because it's moving
Yeah.
so quickly.
Yeah.
So we're talking about potentially seeing like AGI where artificial intelligence is equal to our intelligence in the next 5 years, which is crazy. So like it's going to be more disruptive to industries and jobs and things like that. So
Yeah.
if you don't prepare students, you're really kind of doing them a disservice.
Well, that's what I think too. But what's interesting, and I'm sure you're running against this too, Tim, is that there's still a huge amount of pushback from
Yeah.
teachers, right? They're afraid it's going to inhibit the kids' creativity. They're going to get lazy. It's all the arguments that you heard when the internet first started, right?
Yeah.
Or then email was going to take away people's ability to write, none of which actually happened. I mean, obviously, in some cases, it might have exacerbated something negative, and
Yeah.
but that's the way it is with technology. So, how do you get teachers comfortable with the idea of using AI in the classroom?
Yeah, no, that is a challenge. And even with students,
Yeah,
like some students are using it, other students are afraid to use it because they don't want to be called a cheater.
right.
So it's like, so I kind of said, like, this is a technology that's here, like it or not, it's like the internet, it's like the camera, like photography was the same thing when that happened. It's just going to be part of our culture now. So, like, use it ethically, use it creatively.
Hmm.
And I think there's creative ways to use it, and then there's really lazy ways to use it. So
Yep.
it's not a matter of just asking a question and taking an answer. Because we've had Google search engines for that for years. So it's a matter of like actually being able to try things that you were never able to do before. Like AI in animation is kind of like amazing. You can do
Hmm.
storytelling in a way that was never possible before. So I can go into an elementary class now and a student that like loves cartoons could make their own. And it's like, that's exciting, you know?
That's true. And kind of with regard to that, I think that people kind of get this idea that it's bad because it's taking the place of something. But we had a teacher in our discussion about this who said, look, if it's so easy for your kids to use AI to do a project, it means you've made the project too easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think education needed a push for a long time.
Yeah.
I think certainly the pandemic started it, and then like having AI right after the pandemic will seal that, because it's like
That's true.
people that are still lecturing like like it's 1985 are kind of in deep trouble. I think that's
Yeah,
just not working anymore.
I think that's true. You had mentioned augmented reality, and I wanted to bring that up a little bit, and the idea of XR. Describe what the AR is, because I think there are still some people have a misconception about that, and then XR.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So like, now we're talking about AR, which is augmented reality. So like that really, it started back in like the 70s, and then like in sports you see it all the time. Like, when you watch a football game, they're using augmented reality to kind of show you where the ball is or where it's going
Yeah,
and things like that.
yeah,
And then Pokemon Go was like the big gamified version of it a couple years ago. And now it's everywhere. It's inexpensive. I have the Meta glasses,
yeah,
which have augmented
yep,
reality in them, so you're able to see who's calling you,
yeah.
on your glasses, and
One of the guys that was helping set up has a pair.
they're pretty amazing,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
It's nice. It has the live AI translation, so I was able to go to France and sit at a cafe. I don't speak French at all,
yeah.
but I could understand everything the waiter was saying to me. So like, it's exciting in that way. So augmented reality is something that I think you're going to see more of, as opposed to virtual reality, which is still a little bit expensive. It's getting
Hmm.
cheaper, but and then XR is extended reality. So like, being able to kind of push it, and there's even terms like MR and things like that. So like, there's a lot of
Huh.
growth in sort of like the AR VR
Yeah,
landscape.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
exciting.
What's the MR stand for?
So mixed reality. So like when you're
Okay.
kind of like, so it's similar to AR,
Uh-huh.
but without using a device or anything like that.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I remember when AR was really being discussed, like in the late '90s and 2000s, or early 2000s, and it was going to change the way you bought things, right?
Yeah.
So you were going to be able to watch online, see the art, see the something that you saw on a TV show, then it would pop up, and then you'd be able to place your order. Well, only recently have I started seeing that with Amazon.
Yeah.
You're right. It has a little, if you've probably seen them too, Tim, where a little box will show up on some show and say, hey, you can buy this now if you click on the QR code.
Yeah, Amazon is like right up there in terms of,
Yeah.
because they're working with Claude, so that's like
Oh, yeah.
the AI company that they're so
That's true.
between the AI and the augmented reality, and then the pop-up ads.
Yep.
Yeah, you can see like how important data is, and then they have they also invested heavily in the electric vehicles
Yep.
and this driverless cars, the driverless taxis.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to,
I think is
yeah, that's true. I want to go to your book then, Steam, Power. How did that come about?
Oh, totally by accident, which is kind of
Yeah.
a fun way.
Okay. Yep.
So, I was at a conference, and a friend of mine had written a book, and said, like, do you want to meet my editor? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And then like, it kind of didn't work out. And they said like, oh, well, like, you guys could talk on the phone. And I'm like, should I have an idea to pitch? And, like, just in case, I better give them an idea. So I just shared a presentation that I was giving at conferences. And they said yes. And it's like, I had always heard it was really difficult to get a book published. And I'm like, boy, that was easy. Now, writing a book is a whole nother thing. That's
Yeah.
really difficult, because no one tells you have to write it like 12 times.
Right.
It's in the editing process where it's challenging. But I basically, I was a teacher for over 25 years. And it's like, I just wanted to kind of share my favorite projects, my favorite ways to connect with students. Because like, that's what teachers did for me when I was younger, and it really makes a difference. So I thought, like, why not just share it with everybody?
Yeah, I think that's great. So, part of this obviously came about as a result of you making the argument to put art into STEM.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about what makes art then important in STEM, and what does that look like on a regular basis in a classroom?
So I think the foremost and easiest element is design. So like we all,
Hmm.
design is a major part of art. We teach the design principles, and we all know good design versus bad design. Whether it's the classroom itself, which a lot of the people are still really using like chairs from the 1950s, because of the way
Yes.
we purchase things, and so
Yeah.
like just redesigning the classroom is always a great project. To the things that we use every day, the technologies, the clothes, like anything that's man-made is designed. So especially in the world of, I find that there's a real connection between science and art. It's very easy because we have our creative process, they have their scientific process, which kind of like align fairly well. Um, and I find a lot of scientists actually tend to be artists on the side, so like which makes
Oh,
it interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
So, like, I was just taking a class in quantum because I know quantum computing is going to be really important. And a lot of the math is just way over my head as an art person.
Mhm.
Um, and this is where like AI helps you a lot. So,
I
I
bet.
was working hard as a student there. Like I was just dropping everything and making podcasts to listen to based on the notes on the drive home to kind of understand it. Um, but I think that the creative aspect is certainly really important, along with the design, and then the collaboration. So like artists are kind of good at collaborating, kind of working together in a different way, bringing a different perspective, and that's really valued. One of the things that I thought was great when I talked to a lot of engineers and mathematicians and scientists, is that they said there's lots of people that are really good at like very specific tasks and
Hmm.
roles, but they're kind of missing generalists that are able to kind of like put the whole thing together, like and that's one of the things artists are particularly good at is curating.
Yeah, I think that's true. So when you're working with schools or even particular classrooms and you've got pushback going, no, this shouldn't belong here. So what's your argument?
Like I always take it on as a challenge. I'm like, oh, let me show you why this is. Yeah, I mean, like I would often ask teachers, give me your hardest lesson, one that's really tough to
Hmm.
teach that the students aren't getting, and let me come in and bring, art, as a way to kind of connect the dots for you, because like if visuals really do a huge service to education. So being able to tell a story visually is really really powerful, and then it's gonna make a lasting impact. So like, we're coming up on the Super Bowl soon, and it's
Yeah.
like, the Super Bowl commercials are like a great storytelling lesson for people because it's like the way they tell a story in 30 seconds or less is kind of really a powerful thing that educators could take from, and like that's the art. So like all those people behind the scenes that are kind of like doing the camera work and editing, and like there's an art to all of that. So it's really really helpful, and when you kind of combine the media like that, it just makes for a much more impactful learning
Oh
experience.
yeah. No, I think that's true. So taking from your book, what's like an immediate thing a teacher could take from that and start implementing right away?
So, I shared like 22 of just my favorite projects and
Yeah.
then a bunch of creative exercises. So, regardless of how much money you have or don't have, like cardboard is always the most creative tool ever. So, like, all you need is cardboard. And, like, I have like a project there to kind of uh, create a cardboard chair. So, like, design it and then actually make it load bearing so that you could actually sit
Okay.
in it.
Yeah.
So, a fun challenge. You can make it as creatively as you want to. It really blends together all of the different elements of STEAM. The science is there, the engineering is really pivotal, and it's a fun thing to do. So, like, the teachers often have a bunch of cardboard when things get delivered in the beginning and the end of the year. So, it's a really good project for that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, in the process of writing the book and kind of creating your own approach to this, is there any particular event that stands out for you or a classroom experience that goes, wow, this really worked. And now I'm glad somebody finally gets what I've been trying to say.
Yeah, like I find that the collaborations are the ones that really stand out. So, like, we
Yeah.
had a project where, I'm on Long Island in New York, and we're an island. So, like, water is really important. So, we were making an individual mural that students were kind of like drawing. And then we said, like, all right, well, like, let's work with the science classes and we'll collaborate. We'll learn a little bit of the science. So, like, it's the right animals that we're showing. And then, we started doing like school murals. So, like,
Okay.
it took a lot more time, it was a lot more effort. And then we wanted to scale it up because it was just successful. So we actually talked to the town. I had the students present to the mayor and to the national, the EPA. We got permission to actually do murals for the storm drains to kind of show the community,
Oh, that's
not
great.
to pour anything down the drain because it all goes into our
Yeah.
drinking water. But like it's successful enough that it becomes a legacy project where students will come back from college and work on it. And people are just happy to have them because they beautify at the same time as they illustrate what's happening in the classroom and educate. So like those are
Yeah.
the really powerful ones.
I can see that. So, do you consult with other classes and districts, not just in New York or outside of New York?
Yeah, so like I'm currently like in my district. I'm a teacher on special assignment, working as the
Okay.
technology integration specialist. So
Yeah.
I was a high school teacher for years. Now I'm K-12. I kind of work with all of the teachers in my district, and then through teacher centers and groups like NICEGate, which is a New York State technology group.
Okay.
I kind of teach everyone in New York, and then I do a lot of conferences and I
Yeah.
consult nationally and now internationally. So like I just came from Florida and I did a conference, and I'm going to Seattle for the NCCE conference coming up. And it's kind of great to see what's happening around the country and then around the world. I'm bringing students to Japan and South Korea next week, and we're going to be visiting
That's
some students
great.
there.
Yeah. So, are there, I mean, obviously, there's a lot going on with New York school districts, obviously, with what you're doing. Are there other school districts or states that you feel are further along with incorporating art into STEM?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like Utah certainly has an edge because
Really?
there's such a unified school district.
Yeah.
So like they have like one person in charge of artificial intelligence for the state. So
For the
like
whole
they were saying
state?
the person. Yeah, yeah. So
Okay,
like
man.
essentially an AI czar.
Yeah.
Uh, so they put out guidance early. They kind of like they're just a little bit more organized. They have a really good director that helps a lot. So like they're one of the leaders for sure. California is always one of the leaders. There's just a great love for the arts there, which is
Yeah.
great. Um, and then I've gone to a lot of the large districts in like Georgia and places like that, and they have kind of amazing things going on as well.
Okay. So then I want to get then kind of move then into the ed tech space. So what's your role in ed tech? And then talk to me about how you see technology in education. We've talked about AI, obviously, but some other technologies that you've been looking at.
Yeah, I basically part of my job is to play. So like I will play with the new technologies, kind of figure out like, oh, how would this best be used by teachers? And I'll have conversations with teachers like if they're interested in doing something, and then I'll recommend what tech to kind of use for that. And then kind of, sometimes I'll co-teach the classes. So, it's nice to do
Mm.
that because you're teaching the teacher and the students at the same time. And it gives a more even playing field. So I'll do the professional development for my whole district and then other districts. Um, and you really need to stay up on the different technologies out there. So that's why the conferences are especially important because you get to see so many of the different ed tech companies, and
Oh, I
there's so
bet.
many new startups and mergers and things like that. So keeping track of that, and then of course you want to make sure that safety is an element too. I mean, it's hard to even use tools that don't pass that bar. So
Yeah,
even startups are kind of hard sometimes if they kind of like don't pass the safety test.
I'm sure. So what are some of the new technologies that you're seeing that are worth paying attention to?
So like you have some like terrific tools that combine a couple different things. Like Adobe Express is great because it's free for educators, but you could do animation, you can create websites, you could do film and video, photography, you could do podcasting,
Yeah.
and you could do this from like a cell phone or a Chromebook or an iPad or a device like that. So that's exciting. I mean, like as someone who taught film and video for ages, it used to take like 2 months to do a really good animation, and now it
Yeah.
takes like 2 minutes. Um,
Yes.
so crazy changes there. I think in the creative realm, you're seeing a lot more like drawing in virtual reality is one of the most fun experiences
Mm.
I've ever had. So being able to be inside the drawing,
Oh,
um,
that would be incredible.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
And,
the
and they also like
sorry,
there's a museum. Uh,
what's the platform for that? What's the
there's now a couple different ones. So like there's a bunch of Google's Tilt Brush was like the first big one out there,
mm,
and then they kind of open source some of the elements, and you have a whole bunch of different tools available. Um, so like, you're able to, uh, you know, uh, there's a couple different variations. So like, I like any kind of drawing like that, but like now you could actually do like real painting. Like you have a easel
Really?
and you're able to actually paint. And it's the kind of thing that like, as artists, we talk about getting in the zone.
Yeah.
Um, so like, every time I try it, it's like I will kind of forget what I'm doing and I'm just in the world of painting, even though I'm wearing a headset. There's maybe like 20 people watching me, with a
Yeah.
screen. So it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
That is interesting. So when you're looking at these different education technologies, do you have kind of a process where you're assessing that? Yeah. What does that look like then?
Yeah, so like I kind of have like a little bit of a test, because I also recommend to my district,
Sure.
what to purchase and things like that. So I'm always looking at the new tech, and then we'll often do like a trial test period, with a student group kind of to get an idea of how it works, and that's really nice. There's a lot more focus on careers, which is kind of interesting. So
Hmm.
like, which is helpful, I think. So like, we're able to like through discovery education, like, talk to people in all these different careers, and the students are having like direct conversations, which is fun. Um, and also like, talking to other people like me at other districts
Yeah.
around the country and kind of seeing like, so you're not doing all the lifting yourself and kind of getting an
Right.
idea.
No, I can imagine. I mean, because like you said, even with AI, there's so much going on. I can imagine with ed tech, there's so much going on, and trying to sort out hype from reality. I mean, where do you even start?
Yeah. The hype thing is real. I mean, like that's something where, especially at like conferences and stuff like that, like there's a lot of swag for teachers and things like that
Right.
that could certainly muddy the waters. And I'm always looking at like, all right, well, this is great for right now, but like, what's it going to look like in a year or 2 years? And how are you like really going to integrate this? Because some tools are terrific and like the
Right.
concept is there, but like integration is much more difficult when you have a 30 kids in a room. And like you have to make this work. So I always kind of think of the real deal in terms of that too. So I do a lot of testing, and then I invite students to kind of try a makerspace
Yeah.
that has a lot of different tools. It's just a great playground to sort of like figure out what works and what doesn't.
That I can see that. I mean, that our organization is a nonprofit, and we work directly with media educators K through 12 in Sacramento County here. And all of my board are the heads of IT at each of the one of the 12 school districts that are in the county. So
Oh,
they're the ones that are getting bugged by teachers saying, "Hey, I just got this thing. Can we do it?" They're going, "I got to take a closer look yet." So are you working closely with those kinds of IT folks and tech folks? I would imagine.
yeah, so I'm exactly that. That's
Yeah.
I'm the in between the teachers and the IT staff, and it's also like I think no one ever really knows what I do, so I'm also working with superintendents and the
Yep.
administrators too, and now staff, and now I'm presenting as like to school groups, like the entire senior class I talked to the other day, just because
Oh
like
man.
going into college, you want to prepare them for the realities of like it's a different look, and it's like
Yeah.
you can't depend on a career like you used to. Like it's they're moving targets.
That's true. So, what kind of advice do you give to these kids?
So like really know your strengths is one of the things,
Mm.
and then find ways to compensate for your areas of opportunity.
There you go. Areas of opportunity. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so like
I like
that's
that.
kind of key because I don't think like we all have weaknesses, and you want to work on them, but like in order to really market yourself, I think you really need to find a way to compensate for the things that you're not strong in.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's really helpful. And then I think the human skills are really key now. Collaboration. I was telling kids, like you're likely going to be graduating at the time where AI is just prevalent and everything. It's going to disrupt a lot of the different places. So I would always tell teachers that like we're not going to be replaced by AI. We're going to be replaced by teachers that know how to use AI better than us.
Yes.
And I think with students is the same thing. So like if you're going into a company and one person is able to be much more efficient, well, that person's going to get the job. So I
Yep.
think you really need to learn how to use technology to strengthen
Oh yeah.
your sharper skills, and then sort of compensate for some of your
I
weaknesses.
think that's true. So, given where you see some of this going, what do you think a classroom looks like 5 years from now or in 10 years from now?
There's a good question. I mean, like, I would hope it looks really different. I mean, I've been hoping for that for a while.
Right.
Um, and one of the things that I do is like when I go visit a company, like I was at the Meta headquarters recently, I was
Hmm.
at the Google headquarters in New York. I take tons of pictures and I'm like, why don't we make, a school look more like this? Because it's creative, it's fun. There's a lot of differentiation in terms of types of spaces for different types of people.
Yeah.
And I feel like the classroom should look like that. It shouldn't be the sort of traditional, like, just rows of desks anymore. Like, I feel like it should look more like a creative space where people are able to kind of, find what works for them. It's slow moving education.
Yeah.
That's the way it's
Yeah.
been. But, I'm starting to see that change. There's schools like there was the Blue Schools in New York City
Oh,
that
yeah. I
were
read
like
about those. Uh huh.
great model. Yeah. So I brought my
Yeah.
whole administrative staff there just to look at it and say, like, what can we kind of copy? Um, and now you have schools like the Alpha schools in New York City that are using AI for 2 hours, and then they're doing all like very human focused activities and collaboration games and things like that.
See, those kids going that are learning in that environment are going to be so much more at an advantage over the
Yeah.
kids that are sitting in the rows, listening to the teacher lecture, and they're bored out of their mind, and they that's just not the way people learn anymore.
Yeah, no, and like, I think, it's a shame that like we haven't moved more in education because,
Yeah.
from the time that I was in school to the time I was teaching, things hadn't changed that much. Like the blackboard turned into a whiteboard, which turned into a
A touch,
digital board. But
yeah,
like,
a touch screen television. Yes.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
not enough change for, the world that we're living
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. So I think I saw somewhere in your background too, Tim, about this whole idea of gamification.
Oh,
And
yeah.
are you using that, incorporating that in classrooms, or how is that working?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think Harry Potter does a good job of sort of teaching us how to gamify when you look at the different groups, like the Gryffindor,
Yeah.
sort of like it will ignite students to learn in a way, that they didn't normally. So like, the best learners are going to be fine anyway, but
Yeah.
it definitely does a lot for like sort of your mid-level learners where maybe they don't understand the material, but now they're really motivated. So it does help a lot. I find that the gamified, like, one of the things you learn in terms of the data of education is that, it's not enough to learn information, you have to do something with it. So you
Yeah.
have to, whether it's taking a test or like translating it into something else or teaching it, whatever, you need to actively do something if you're going to remember it. So gamification is really good at doing that. And, when you can strengthen teamwork skills and collaboration at the same time, it's great. So like I love gamification along with global education. So when,
Hmm.
we do a couple projects where we're working with like 5 or 6 different schools around the world, and like they have totally different perspectives and bringing different ideas
I
to it
love that.
and different cultural understandings. Like that's amazing because it's like there's so much learning that you kind of anticipate, and then there's all of this bonus learning of learning about these different ways that people
Yeah.
live.
So give me an example of what that would look like.
So we're doing a project now. So like, we start. So I'm working with the group Take Action Global, and we kind of, we all kind of find a native species of plant or animal that kind of represents us, and then we kind of like work and kind of create a presentation about that, and then share it with each other just as a starting place. And then we kind of talk about the different environmental projects that we are
Hmm.
doing, because like, ultimately what's happening in my environment will actually impact you as well. So like, we have one planet that we need to take care of, so it kind of helps understanding how like whatever's happening locally has a impact globally. So I think
Yeah.
it's interesting, and it's always a great learning experience.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, for these kids to be exposed to other students in other countries, to getting a completely different perspective, and yet we're all human beings, so we all have similar things that we care about, right? I love that. That's really great.
Yeah, I mean, like, I learned early on, like travel is like one of the best teachers you could have. So,
Yeah.
it's great to kind of get those different perspectives. And we're a global, world now. So it's like,
Absolutely.
it also gives those students a great edge in sort of going into the real world because it's like you're often working with people internationally.
Yeah. I can imagine, the gamification, and I could be wrong, but I can imagine that it pulls kids who are more introverted into
Yeah.
that kind of situation that they wouldn't normally have an opportunity to.
Yeah, it lets you meet students where they are. So, like,
Yeah.
you might be shy. You're not going to be the person that raises your hand, but like you might love learning. So it's like,
Hmm.
even like, like a fun sort of app like Duolingo.
Yeah.
We're practicing how to learn language because it's like when you go to a place, we're going to Japan, like it's just being able to have a couple of phrases and speak a little bit of the language really helps and it's appreciated. Um, so like we know when you're getting points and you're reported and you're seeing that
Yeah.
like, oh, your best friend is on there too, and badges and things like that. It really, it ignites it. And then like, I'm also learning chess because I'm just
There you go.
interested.
Yeah.
So,
What I'm picking up here, Tim, is that you're in a constant state of learning,
I
and that
think
which
that's
is a
true.
great thing because I've always felt like if I lose my curiosity and I wake up one day and go, yeah, I don't really care, then I might as well just stay at home,
Yeah.
right? Because especially dealing with kids in media, and I come out of journalism and marketing and that, if I was never curious, I would have never done anything of value in any of those endeavors.
Yeah, so true. And as a teacher, like, I remember being younger and seeing some of the people that were kind of burnt out. And I'm like, oh, I don't ever want to be that Brian, like, so it's
Right.
like, it keeps you young, I think, because I'm just as interested after 27 years as I was when I started.
Yeah.
I'm just much more knowledgeable. I think you just gain confidence in trying anything at some
Right.
point. So I think that, like, it's also important to model being a good learner
Yeah.
to students. I think that's really helpful.
I think it is too. I want to just ask you briefly about the videography part. You said you spent about 20 years teaching that. We deal a lot, like I said, with media educators. What drew you to that, and what were some of your takeaways of doing that experience that you now incorporate into what you do now?
There's so much. I mean, I always loved it. I was a film lover from early on. I think it's like our consummate form of storytelling.
Yeah.
So I was like, I would go to see all of the films that came out, and like now it's like a lot of you're able to just it's more accessible. But what's exciting is like in teaching film for over 20 years, I've had lots of students go into the industry and then
Hmm.
be able to kind of feed us back, and like you're learning what that real world is like. So I have like three kids that work at Rick and Morty, the TV show, and
Yeah.
like, they rose the level of directors, and Alana Glazier, who like pitched a show, and then has now got over $1 million for um, uh, uh, script, and you have
Yeah.
students working at ILM and Pixar and
Yeah.
Disney. So it does help because I think again, my parents were a little bit afraid when I went into a creative career. And now I'm able to kind of say, like, our most successful graduates are almost all in the arts.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
if you look at what's happening, it's like, I could give you like 20 people like that are immensely successful and having exciting careers.
Yeah. So, what do you think besides the ability to create content do kids take away from that experience of working on those
Well,
kinds of projects?
I think one of the things that I was surprised at is like, when you teach these skills, there's the kids that go into film or art or photography and things like that. And then there's the kids that go into business that come back and say thank you because it's like it helps them in those roles too. So I think,
Yeah.
like being able to tell a story is a powerful thing to do regardless of what you do. So like I think storytelling is the core aspect, and then being able to understand how to create media. I mean, we
Yeah.
want to take students from being just consumers to really being creators, because it's not just empowering, but it enables them to really have a voice. And I think that's
Yep.
the most powerful thing teachers could do.
I think so too. I mean, because we deal with K through 12, and then we have an award program that'll be coming up here at the end of April. So we have 6 different categories we give awards to in 4 age groups. So when you see all these, especially the little kids, like
Yeah.
second and third and fourth and fifth graders, some of the kind of really fun stuff they create, but you just see how proud they are of the
Yeah.
fact that they've done that. And I think they also learn the ability to collaborate with other people, to take
Yep.
constructive criticism from each other. Those are all pretty valuable that you don't get in a lot of other settings.
Yeah, I think Kurt Vonnegut said like art is good for the soul, and I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
so like yeah, I totally agree. Like it's great for collaboration. It's great for learning about yourself. I think
Yeah.
you really understand yourself when you're kind of doing this as well. So like it's really powerful. And then there's lots of people that just do it for fun too, and I think that's totally appreciated. Like it gives you an outlet. And like as we're kind of moving, like technology is becoming such a big part of our lives.
Yeah.
And I think that like creating anything, just any kind of making, kind of brings joy in a way that is really necessary.
I think so too. So, a couple last questions. What projects are you working on?
So I'm working on a new book now
Yeah.
about creativity in the age of AI, which is
Oh,
sort of
that's
like our
great.
conversation.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And ways to really enable and strengthen that. And then I also am working on a children's book version of my book Steam Power as well. So like to kind of help communicate it to younger audiences.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So, if you were going to sit in front of a teacher who was still reticent about pulling art into their creativity in their classroom, what kind of advice would you give them?
I think that like when I ask them like what they remember, what are their most positive experiences from school, like
Uh-huh.
they tend to involve the arts in one way or another. So like because it's like it's fun, and I think fun is something that's definitely under appreciated in teaching. Oftentimes like people see it as unstructured or like they're conceptually they're kind of afraid that they don't know what they're doing, and I think that's fine. I think uh, when you kind of have the experience, and like one of the things I do is always volunteer to co-teach it with them,
Mm.
so that they're not just on the line themselves. That really helps, and it's always a really powerful experience. So it's like once you kind of do it. Like I used to have to kind of work to get teachers to try things like that, and then
Yeah.
the success actually just allows people to now sign up by themselves, so I don't have to even sell it.
I could see that. I mean, I think that most people don't understand how much work artists put into what they do to be good at it.
Yeah.
I've been trying to learn how to play guitar for a couple of years, and I signed up for master class, and I had Tom Morello, who's a guitarist with Rage Against the Machine, has a whole multi-part thing in there, and he was talking about when he first started. He wasn't really sure if he wanted to do it. It's sort of like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and somebody said, "You're never going to get any good doing that." And so he started building up to it to where now he practices 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And when you listen to him play and the crazy stuff he does with the guitar, he would not have been able to get there without 8 hours of work a day.
Yeah, talk about creativity. Like,
Yes.
like he's a great example because he's using the guitar in ways that
yeah.
like people just didn't before him. He's like
Yep.
he's like a modern day Hendrix in a sense.
Yeah, he really is. No, that's for sure. So, last question. If you were going to go back to Tim Needles in college, what advice would you give yourself?
Enjoy the ride would be
Okay, there you go.
So like I think I've always been future oriented, and I think that one of the things I've learned as I've taught and I'm getting older is to really value the moment and make sure you enjoy it. So that's my message for students too.
Okay, that's really good advice. That's great, Tim. Any last thing you want to leave off here before we close out?
I usually leave all my presentations by saying, be kind, be creative, and change the world.
Love it. Okay, that's really good advice for everybody. All right. Well, thank you, Tim. That's it for this episode of Lights, Camera, Learn. You can catch us on Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, and also on our website, secctv.org. You can also support us on Patreon by clicking on Lights, Camera, Learn. Till the next episode, make it a great day. Thank you.